And then the bottom slides are sent to your email. Okay, so give us just a minute here.
If I get them to you by email, can you deal with it?
Yes, or I think I sent it out.
Take it today, right?
Yeah, okay. Sure. Right, on the other side. Practice. Cool.
Might have to stay fairly close to that.
Okay. My name is Kristina Boecker. I am currently a third-year student at Bethel University. And this summer, I worked at Bethel on building 2 atomic clocks and getting a frequency measurement with those clocks. So to start off, I just wanted to address what an atomic clock is. It's basically when we control the frequency of an oscillator. In our case, we use a laser and match that to the frequency of an atomic transition. So a counter then counts that frequency, and that's where we actually get a time measurement. I also wanted to address why we're using atoms, why we're locking to those atomic transitions. And it's because those transitions are very narrow, so they're really good frequency markers. Atoms in a gas phase are also not easily perturbed, and all atoms of a particular species, in our case, we use rubidium-87 and rubidium-85. They're all identical and ageless. So with rubidium, we're kind of taking advantage of a 2-photon transition. So the cool part about this is we send in a red laser and we get blue light out. And we specifically use a retroreflected beam. So the atoms absorb photons coming from 2 different directions. So any Doppler shift due to the atoms moving around, since they're in a gas phase, is canceled out. And so this is kind of a simplified version of the transition diagram. Since we're using both rubidium-85 and rubidium-87, their fine structure is different. So the frequency of those transitions are going to be slightly different, as you can see. So when we're using a laser, we need 2 different frequencies then. And this is a picture of that beautiful blue glow I was talking about. This isn't the clock I was working on. It's one my professor has previously worked on. But ours does look like this. I just couldn't get a good picture of it, but it's pretty. So like I said, we're using two different types of rubidium. So we have two different cells, but we're only using one laser. So we take that laser and we split it, and we pass one part of the laser straight to the Rubidium 87 cell, and then the other one goes through an AOM, and the AOM changes the frequency, and then that goes to the Rubidium 85. So what we're actually measuring with this clock is how much that AOM has to change the frequency of the laser in order to lock to that other transition. And we're actually measuring the frequency gap between those two isotopes. So those are the diagram of the two cells, but here they are in real life. As you can see, they have some different setups around them. So our Rubidium 85 cell was actually built by Bethel students. All the stuff around it was set up by Bethel students. The Rubidium 87 cell was actually borrowed to us from an Air Force research lab that my professor, Dr. Lemke, used to work at. So, a big similarity between these two is that they both have rubidium cells. That's those clear cylinders that you can see in the middle. But they also do have some significant differences. So one big thing is the way that those cells are heated. So as you can see in the Rubidium 87, those copper blocks have resistive heaters attached to them, and that's how we're heating the cell. And then those pipes conduct the heat into the cell. For the Rubidium 85, we have a resistive heater attached to the bottom of that box, and that's heating the rubidium cell. We also, something important with these is we need to care about magnetic fields, because any stray magnetic fields are going to shift the frequency that the atomic transitions happen at. So for the Rubidium 85, we have these circles going on. They're the Helmholtz coils, coils of wire, and we send current through those, and those cancel out any stray magnetic fields. For the Rubidium 87 cell, that rectangle is actually a mu metal box, and that mu metal blocks out magnetic fields. So something to note is that our heaters are outside of that box. And since we're using resistive heaters, we're sending current through those heaters, and that current has a magnetic field, but it's outside the box, so it's blocked out. However, in our Rubidium 85 cell, our heater is right next to that box. So what we're actually using with our heater is alternating current. So the goal of the AC heater is that the direction of the current is flipping back fast enough that it's not causing any significant frequency shifts in our atoms. And I test that a little bit later, and I'll explain it. And the last thing is that these both have PMTs, photomultiplier tubes. That is how we detect that blue light I was talking about. So that's right there. And for the Rubidium 87 cell, that box has a cover, and the PMT is on top of that cover. And so we can detect every time the atoms glow blue. And so when we're looking at that, this is the signal. The green line is the signal from the PMT. The pink triangle wave is actually us scanning the frequency of the laser. And you can see when the laser hits certain frequencies, we're seeing the fluorescence for each of those atomic transitions. You can also see that Rubidium 85 is clearly different than Rubidium 87. We're going to need two different frequencies. And so we really want to, in the clock when we're taking data, we hold the laser to the point where we're seeing the highest fluorescence. So right here and right here. And we keep the frequency at that point where we're seeing the highest fluorescence, and that's where we take data from. So once we take data, we can get a plot looking like this, and this is a standard plot used to compare clock stability. It's basically the total deviation of our data, the standard deviation of our data averaged over time. And so what you should care about this, what's important is at around 1 second of averaging time, the deviation of our data is in the range of 10 to the minus 12. That's good. That's about where we want it to have high enough statistical precision to do the measurements we want to do. So those measurements we want to do, I tested that AC
Onboard
heater.
drag control systems.
I tested that AC heater. And so this plot might look a little boring, but it's actually exciting for what it's showing. So before that big orange line, our AC heater was running. It was controlling the heat of the rubidium cell. But at that big orange line, I physically turned it off. It was totally off. And as you can see, there was no significant changes in our data. And so therefore we found out, we came to the conclusion that our AC heater, from what we can tell, is not causing any significant shifts in our frequency of our transmissions, which is good. That's what we wanted. The other thing I tested was the magnetic coils. I varied the current going through those coils, and you can see at those minimum and maximum, that's when any magnetic fields that was causing a shift in the frequency are completely canceled out. So after I took this data, I left the current in the coils at those points where I saw a maximum and minimum, and for any future data I took, I left it at that current. And lastly, I want to talk about why clocks. Why should we care about clocks? Why should you care about me testing an AC heater and magnetic coils? So the goal of this project is kind of to improve portable clocks and get them smaller and working better. And so portable clocks have a lot of important applications. They're needed by communications, satellite navigation, and deep space exploration. And you might be wondering why there's a tractor on this page. So my professor actually owns a farm, and on his farm, he has tractors that have GPSs on top of them. So that's that yellow circle right on the top. So the more we can improve our portable clocks, the better we can get our GPS, and the better we can, the better precision we can have in planting and fertilizing things, which is really cool. And that's all I have for you guys. Thank you.
The gallery so we can monitor for questions on Zoom. Does anybody in the room have a question?
Where you had the graph showing like the frequency, I think it was relative to when you had the AC heater on and off.
Mhm.
What would it have looked like if the AC heater
Yeah.
did?
So it would have definitely been a significant shift. And I could kind of tell that from when I had tested the coils previously, because as I varied that current going through the coils, I changed the magnetic fields, and you could see like big jumps.
If anyone on Zoom has a question, if you could use the raise hand reaction, we'll be able to see your question, or you could just kind of shout it out.
Yeah, my question is why rubidium? I understand most atomic clocks use cesium. So why group 1 elements, and why in particular rubidium? And what's rubidium going to be able to do for you that cesium won't do?
Yeah, so I think rubidium is accessible, and also we can have it in the gas phase that we want it to at like around 100 degrees Celsius. And yeah, so we could get a hold of it, and it's in the right phase, in the right temperature range that we want it to be.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's an AOM?
Acoustic optical modulator. And it basically, as a laser passes through it, it can change the frequency of the laser, and we can control how much it changes the frequency.
In a navigation system, where is the clock? Is the clock on the tractor? Is the clock on the satellite? Both?
I would think on the satellite. I actually don't know if it's in both.
It isn't, there's a clock in each. That's how
Okay,
they
yeah.
get the distance measurements. It's by time. That's part of it. Other questions?
I'm so sorry. But in the tractor, you don't have, right, cesium or rubidium clock.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know what
What type of clocks they
constitutes-
actually
what
use.
type of clock
sort of
is in the
commercially.
receiver unit.
I wouldn't know either.
All right, any others? No? All right, thank you. So we go from lasers to rockets. Joseph Bruce, how rocketry can advance Native American youth and tribal communities.
So you want to start your recording over again?
Films.